All right, as you all know, I'm Joyce Flanagan, and I direct the Health Sciences program. I want to welcome everybody this evening, kind of getting a critical mass here. Hi, Desmond. So this evening, I'm really excited to host three great alums. They've all been a part of this session in the past. So they have a lot of wisdom and insight to impart. So I hope you all will be listening actively, and please don't hesitate to post any of your questions down in the chat. I'll try to do my best to notice those and bring those up. But so if the guests want to kind of wave your hand as I give your name and a very brief introduction, we've got Ryan Stover, 2012 grad from Hanover. He was a biology major, and he currently is senior account executive in oncology for Ambry Genetics. And then we have Allison Montgomery. Give us a wave. There's Allison. Allison graduated just a few years ago in 2018 with a biology major and a business minor. Is that correct, Allison? Okay. And she is currently working as a medical trials senior associate at Eli Lilly. And then finally, last but not least, we have Desmond Marks. Give us a wave, Des. Great. And Desmond graduated in 2015. He was a chemistry major, and you also had a business minor. Is that correct, Des?
I was part of the Business Scholars Program. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And he currently serves as level 2 district sales manager for Indiana for Cook Medical. So that's just the barest of introductions. What I will now let them each do is give a little bit more. It's going to be like an onion that we're going to peel tonight. You're going to hear just a little bit at a time, but I'd like you each to just briefly introduce yourselves, talk about where you're from. I think we mentioned your major minor combo, but if there's something I'm missing there, you can provide that. But you can also talk about other experiences during your time at Hanover, whether they are involvement in clubs and organizations or athletics. Did you do anything like internships, externships, things of that nature? And then if you attended a graduate school, if you could name that and the program. So just kind of talking way back when, but Des, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Perfect. Hey, everyone. As she said, my name is Desmond Marks. I'm originally from Bloomington, Indiana, but I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. At Hanover, chemistry major, was part of the Business Scholars Program, played basketball for all 4 years, was a hall director and a student ambassador. And then currently I'm getting my MBA through Purdue, and see what else. Yeah, and then that's really about it. So yeah.
Pretty active as a student and a 4-year athlete, you said. Wow.
Yep.
Okay. That's a lot. Okay, awesome. Allison, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Evansville, Indiana. And then at Hanover, I was involved in my sorority. I had jobs in the advancement office, in the career center, and some other clubs. I did not do any graduate degrees yet, I guess I should say. And I'm currently living in Indianapolis.
Okay. And speaking of your position with the Career Center, Margaret Krantz says hello, Allison. Okay. Finally, Ryan, why don't you go ahead and give your little background.
Thanks, Joyce. Yeah, I'm from north of Kokomo, small town. Then obviously went to Hanover, played baseball for 4 years, and was also in Fiji there, the fraternity. I live in Fishers now, which is just north of Indianapolis. So, and really cover the central Indiana area for my company. So it's really works out great and don't have to travel too much like I used to. So.
And did you do a grad program after Hanover?
Nope,
Okay.
just right into the workforce, learning by fire.
Okay, So that's kind of part of the beauty of this session. All three of you entered the working field, with your bachelor's degree from Hanover. So I think that's awesome. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit deeper. And students, remember, if you've got questions at any point, don't hesitate to put those in the chat. So talk just a little bit about your path to your profession. Did you know about it as an undergraduate student? If so, how did you learn about it? How did you fall into it, so to speak? Or was it something you were well aware of? Ryan, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Yeah, great question. I had no idea that this field even existed, or the extent of it. I was a biology major for my career at Hanover and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I did an internship where I was not even in healthcare. I kind of traveled around the United States in a sales role and really loved it, and then moved to Georgia and worked for that company for about 3 years. Then I was able to move back up to Indiana, and I got recruited on LinkedIn from a little company in genetics that was building out a sales team for their pediatric genetic testing. And I was finally able to use my biology degree and really cut the learning curve down, having that background. And I know a lot of bio majors don't go into sales, but I have used it a lot, and really did just fall into this. And that was in 2015. So I've been in the genetics industry for around 7 years.
Okay. Can you, so the sales had nothing to do with science right out of Hanover. You were just getting sales experience.
Yep.
Okay. Good to know. All right. And LinkedIn, that's awesome. There was a LinkedIn session earlier today, rocking your LinkedIn profile. Clearly, your biology major was posted on LinkedIn, and that was key to the offer. Okay.
I mean, that's the reason I was even approached on LinkedIn for sure. So huge.
Great shout out to LinkedIn. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Desmond, what about you? What did you know about your career? How did you find it?
So I actually had no idea it existed either. So very similar boat. When I was doing my independent study between my junior and senior year, or the research for it, I realized that I didn't necessarily want to go work in a lab for the rest of my life. And so I talked to actually Craig Phillip, and he helped me out a lot in explaining to me that industry, quote unquote, existed. So between my junior and senior year, I did an internship at Cook, really started to realize what they had to offer, what the medical device realm looked like, and what potential was. And I enjoyed talking to people, but I also wanted to use my science background. So right out of college, med device and pharmaceuticals, and I'm sure genetics too, anything in the medical realm takes some level of sales experience, quote unquote. And so I had to do something very similar where I took a sales job selling door-to-door advertising. And then after about 6 months of that, they said, you have enough sales experience now in that hard-nosed type of selling to come in and start as a sales associate at Cook. And then I've been there ever since. So this is my 7th year with Cook doing this. And it took me, I had no idea what it was my junior or my freshman and sophomore year. Thought I was going to go work in a lab. And then this kind of opened up and I said, this is kind of what I want to do. So.
Okay. We'll dig into what this is in just a minute here. Okay, awesome. Allison, what about you?
Yeah, similar. I kind of decided that I wanted to be on the business side of science first, but I don't think I knew what that meant at the time. So I was just applying to anything and everything that I thought was interesting that could kind of get my foot in the door so I could learn more. So that's how I ended up at Lilly in the role I am now. But yeah, just talking to people and kind of trying to understand what that meant. Besides, I think all I knew was like hospital administration. So trying to understand what all that involved.
Can you talk a little bit about those jobs? What were you utilizing to apply to different jobs, like Monster, LinkedIn? I mean, what tools were you using?
Just about everything, but I did get this position through Ascend Indiana, which ended up
Okay.
being really helpful. It was just starting up at the time I was starting to
Mhm.
apply.
Mhm.
So I know they've gained a lot of traction now, so I'd recommend looking into
Yeah.
them. They're
Okay.
really helpful. But yeah, that is how I got my interview at Lilly.
Okay, Ascend, and that is just within the state of Indiana. And it's for, I believe, jobs and internships, but because Indiana is very rich in health organizations, there are quite a few included. So that's something students to remember. Okay, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts. What do you guys actually do? Can you talk about, maybe describe a typical day for you that might include like the range of activities that you do most of the time? And that might be a way for you to sort of describe. If you have to go outside of that, that's fine. And you can even throw in like your work week, you work, Monday through Friday, or you work a few weekends or whatever. But Desmond, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So a typical day, wake up. I normally have cases scheduled out. So my role is selling medical devices in the peripheral realm. So that includes stents, catheters, wire guides, things that are minimally invasive to help treat disease states. So I deal with a bunch of different parts of the hospital. So it's whether interventional radiology, the cath lab, the OR. They all have different protocols, but basically I work with physicians in the operating room that they're in. So today, for example, I got a call from a doctor. He said, "Hey, I have a case today at about noon. Can you come?" I said, "Sure, totally." So basically I go in, I'm wearing lead. The patient's on the table right in front of me. I could technically touch the physician. Obviously that's not allowed, but I'm that close, and basically we walk through the procedure together. So it's understanding disease state, it's understanding how my product works in a specific part of the body, how it doesn't work, what would be good for the patient, and then basing it off of the physician's treat algorithm too. So their algorithm is basically what they do when they see some type of disease, what they normally do to treat that. So that's basically most of my day. So it's being in the car, driving to these hospitals, trying to find cases, talking to physicians, trying to encourage them to use certain products or help them through different things. And then obviously it's sales. So it's going to sell these products too of, hey, have you seen this new product? What are your thoughts on this? Here's the new data on certain things. And then that's basically it. So a typical week, I probably am in the OR every day, at least for one case. Normally it's 2 to 3. And then I'm driving. So I cover Indianapolis over to Terre Haute, up to Lafayette, Bloomington, Columbus, and Evansville. So depending on the day, I'm in the car driving to one of those places. And then depending on when the procedures are happening, sometimes I work weekends, sometimes I work late at night. There's been times where I've been in cases for, I think there was one on Memorial Day, or the weekend of Memorial Day was 8 hours. So I got there at 2 and didn't get done until about 10 o'clock. And then there's travel for conferences and stuff like that. But it's a normal day. I carry the product with me sometimes it's on the shelf. But yeah.
So I assume you have a lot of learning, reading. When does that happen? Are you able to, like, it'd be awesome if you could listen, while you're traveling, but
Yep.
do you take advantage of that, or?
Yeah, so there's 2 things I do. I listen to a ton of Audible books, so that's kind of been a great thing. And then there's great podcasts. So there's a back table podcast, things like that talk about the procedures that I'm directly involved in. Other times I try to once or twice a week sit down and just look at journal articles about new stuff coming out. And then I read them, highlight them on my iPad. And then if it's something interesting, I'll say, "Hey, doc, can I come in and talk to you about this? I want to get your opinion." So it's kind of an always learning. So it's a learning by doing and learning by learning. So I have to still read, I still have to do all these different things. But then it's also asking questions while in procedures where you see something that I've never seen before. And it's like, how do you normally deal with this? Or what do you do when this situation comes up? And it's great because physicians love to teach. Most of them do. And a lot of them have different thoughts on different things, just like all of us do. And so it's great to kind of encompass all of those things. And because I get to work with a bunch of different doctors, I get a broader spectrum of what's going on in the medical realm.
Very cool. All right, thank you. Ryan, you want to talk about a typical day for you?
Yeah, I think Desmond made some really good points there about what sales really is. And I think, especially in my capacity, is providing solutions to both providers and the individual clinic, and then all the way up to the health system. So really my company started, Ambry Genetics started in 1999, and that was, really early on in the genetic testing world. There were actually patents on genes at that time, so we couldn't test for like the two biggest genes, BRCA1 and 2. So there's this, whole story about how the Supreme Court overruled this, and it kind of opened up the floodgates, really. And then Angelina Jolie was another kind of boom for this industry. Really started spreading awareness of it. The challenge is getting primary care physicians, OBGYNs, GI, breast surgeons, really broad, as Desmond was saying too. I work with a very broad set of provider types. So just getting them to disrupt their workflow and able to send in a diagnostic test, first identify if the patient meets criteria. So what our test does is assesses a panel of genes, and if you have a family history of cancer. So we will send the provider a report after we run the DNA, and it'll provide that provider with a negative variant of unknown significance, which is basically treated as a negative, and then a positive. So if it's positive, there's different screening that the patient can undergo. So for instance, if a patient has a family history of breast, ovarian, possibly prostate cancer, they get tested. We found a mutation in BRCA2, and then that patient, could be tested at age 25 all the way up till 90. So really what we're trying to do is prevent cancer from happening in the first place. That's the biggest point of, I think, broadly in the medical field, but especially in my industry, is prevention. The majority of our tests ordered right now are cancer patients that have already developed cancer, and they're sending us the test to see what kind of treatments, how we can tailor those treatments to that individual patient. So precision medicine, you'll hear a lot of that, kind of a buzzword, but really prevention is where I'm focused on mostly. And it's identifying these high risk patients for health systems. So putting in place solutions where you're going in to see your primary care provider, and you get a text from a chatbot 5 days prior, and you fill out your personal and family history. It flags it for the provider. The provider just clicks in their electronic health record, sends a test. So it makes it a lot easier now. So this is really where the industry is going, and trying to provide access to genetic testing to patients that were never offered it in the past. So that's really where this is headed, and it's extremely exciting. So
awesome. Does Ambry, did I hear in there that they are also doing research to further the field as well?
Yep. So
All of their cases.
I think we're the biggest lab that does the most amount of research, and we do a lot of coordination with large health systems. They have big cohorts that we can study, academic centers, that kind of thing. And then more and more we're getting into the pharmaceutical world as well. So doing, a lot of the pharmaceutical companies want this genetic data, and that's where we can partner. And, it's kind of a win-win for everyone. It's a win for the patient, it's a win for the provider, it's a win for the pharmaceutical company and the genetics company. So diagnostics is frustrating a lot of times because there's so many moving parts. But at the end of the day, it's awesome because you can essentially prevent a cancer from happening. So
yeah, that sounds very meaningful. Thank you. Allison, talk to us about the pieces of what you do as a medical trials senior associate at Lilly.
Yeah, so I work with our clinical trial sites. So they're doctors and staff at hospitals, small doctors' offices, or even universities, to get them ready to see our patients for our clinical trial. So that involves budgeting, contracting, making sure they're trained. They have all the supplies on site, they have the drug on site. So as soon as that patient comes through the door, the process is as smooth as possible. I also manage overarching that startup activity is like our FDA submission and our Health Canada submission. So I make sure those are in and we're good to go from a regulatory perspective. So my day-to-day is working directly with sites, just kind of talking to their coordinators, making sure they have what they need. And then weekly I meet with my teams because there's a lot of moving parts. There's departments that give supplies and IP and people that oversee data management. So it's just kind of coordinating and communicating to make sure when the patient comes in the door, everything's where it needs to be so they have a smooth experience.
Sounds like a job of 1,000 details. A
Yeah,
lot of
exactly.
moving parts, as you said. Can you talk about some of, like, what are your favorite things about what you do and maybe things that you don't enjoy as well? Allison?
Yeah, I think my favorite parts are being able to communicate with so many variety of people, both in Lilly, so my colleagues working on other pieces of it, and talking to those doctors and their staff who are getting to see the patients, because I think sometimes it's easy to be closed off from that kind of real world piece of it. I would say my least favorite part is kind of the red tape, trying to get through to get this drug to patients. While it's necessary, it's kind of frustrating sometimes when you know you have something that could be helpful, but it kind of can take months to get where it needs to go. So.
Okay, thank you. Desmond, what would you identify as the pieces that you really, really enjoy and maybe those that are not as enjoyable for you?
Yeah, so I'll start with the ones that I don't like the most.
Okay.
I drive a ton. In the last 3 years, I've put almost 100,000 miles on a car, and so it's every day in the car at least an hour. So it's not the most fun. You make it the best as you can. You listen to podcasts, music, books, things like that. The other thing that sometimes sucks is it's really difficult to get new things, and Ryan knows this. In sales, it's always nice to have new things to talk about. In our industry, it's heavily regulated for good reason, whether it's patient care, you need to make sure the patient has something safe, or it's how we can talk to physicians about things. So getting new things in the pipeline is sometimes super difficult. So sometimes things can stagnate for a little bit, which, it is what it is. It happens in every business. It just seems to happen a little bit more in the medical realm because there's such regulation around it that it has to make sure that it goes through all the hoops that you need to go through. So the things I love, the seeing a patient immediately get better after a case is one of the best things you'll ever see. So for me, I help restore blood flow, whether it's arterial or venous blood. So people will go from, I have a black sore on my toe and it needs to get cut off, to in 3 months, they can walk with a walker again and they can play with their grandkids. Or if it's in the venous realm, their leg is so swollen they can't walk and they have to drag it. And then we put a stent in there, we get in there, clean everything out and put a stent in, and then they have normal flow again and their swelling goes down and they go back to being active. So those things are super rewarding. And just the feeling of being needed and helping people. So being able to say, hey doc, I have this great product that'll help, or hey doc, I know enough about what we're doing here that I might recommend another product in the industry so that this patient can get back to living the way they want to live. So those two things are super, super rewarding. Those are probably my two favorite parts by far.
Awesome, thanks. Ryan, what do you like and what do you not like?
Yeah, that's a good point about the regulation. One good thing about genetics is it's not heavy regulated. The insurance companies just kind of dictate what you can do and not do based on how they cover it. That'd be one thing I hate dealing with, is the insurance companies. But more and more, as more labs come into the space, testing's getting more affordable. They're really starting to pick it up. Insurance can be very short-sighted in thinking and take a long time to adjust to the standard of care that these providers need to give their patients, and probably is a main reason why a lot of these patients weren't tested when they should have been. So that'd be probably the worst, but definitely, like Desmond said, is the success stories or the case examples that we get to see. And I'm very lucky because I get to work with a certified genetic counselor that's on my team. So anytime something gets very in the weeds, I can bring her in, and just hearing her present, walking through case examples and saying this patient was identified and she, was stage 0 cancer, and they were able, it's amazing. So that's really when it hits home. And I need to remind myself of that, like, more than I do, because I get so, sales and talking to different people and making sure everything goes right, you just kind of forget about the patient sometimes. And I think that's number one, really, and why I love healthcare.
Well, you guys have alluded to the values. I sent you an exercise asking you to think about the must-haves that are a part of your work. And I'm, especially you, Des and Ryan, I feel like I'm hearing that a little bit, but why don't you, Ryan, did you do the exercise, and is there something that rose to the top for you, one or two that you'd like to talk about and why they're important to you in your work?
Sorry, I did not do the exercise.
Oh, okay.
The 4 month.
Allison or Desmond, did you? Because we can have somebody else. Desmond, let's have Desmond, and you'll know what
Okay.
we're talking about. Yeah.
Thanks.
This was where you have the long list and you whittle down, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 5 biggest ones that I had: leadership, innovation, freedom, balance, and vision. So leadership is really, really important. In the medical field, it's crazy to think that almost 100 years ago, physicians didn't have to have a science class to go to med school, or they barely had to. And now we require all these things. So having leadership in the medical field is really exciting, because as humans, obviously, we're trying to progress and live longer and live healthier lives. So having leadership in our roles is really important, whether it's we're out there talking to physicians or we're planning these trials for these medicines coming down the pipeline. We have to make sure we have as much leadership as possible. Innovation goes hand in hand with that. The only way we can progress in this industry is to continue to get better and better and better. And it's not the most efficient market in the world, and it's not there's plenty of things that go wrong, but the goal is to innovate as much as possible to make people's lives better. Freedom. So I know I talked about the regulations, things like that. To have kind of the freedom of thought, to try new things, to look at different aspects of life, to bring into the medical realm was really important. And specifically for me, to be able to have the freedom to run my own business the way Cook looks at it is my territory is my own business. I run it how it is. If it's successful, great. If it's not, then that's also on me, and all those different things. Balance. I am a big, big proponent of balance, and people can get lost in the weeds of, okay, I have to go to all these cases, I have to go to all these doctors and all these different things, because it's really easy to, because we're doing cool things. But having the balance to say, I still have to take care of myself, I still have to focus on my mental health, my physical health, all of those different things, and live a fun, good life in addition to work. And then finally, vision. So I know that a lot of them are very forward-looking, but constantly trying to have a vision of where you want to be as a person, and also how that fits into your work and your life and all those different things. So those are the 5 for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Allison, if you want to talk about it, fine. If not, this is great. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of this similar things. I think something I had was versatility, and I think that's something that you can work on at Hanover, and really kind of broadening your knowledge base, not just in your field, whether it's a science, but also kind of taking things that interest you. Because still till this day, that's really important. I might have my focused job, but being able to develop different interests help me and better me in my role. And then obviously that helps us as a company. And then the other thing I put is collaboration, because that's how I found was the best way to learn, was listening and talking, because there's, medicine continues to develop, and there's tons of people and very smart people that came before me. So learning from them, and then also, even though you'll be early in your career, you have a lot to offer and a new perspective to offer people. So I think that's really important as well.
I like that. Yeah, that's good. And becoming a part of a team that is very diverse, perhaps in age, like you're talking about, people who have been in it for years, but you have something to offer as well. Ryan, if you want to add anything, you may, but don't feel obligated. It's just qualities that you think are important. I heard both you and Des kind of saying, at the bottom line is you love helping people, and making a difference. And those are two pieces for me that are hugely important, having meaningful work.
I think, yeah, that's huge. I think that's the reason we're all in healthcare, or at least should be the reason, right? And I think Allison and Des both hit it on the head with Hanover, being like such a, liberal arts education, and being able to study different things and topics. Yeah, just read other stuff. Like, don't get so down a rabbit hole with what your job is. Like, broaden your horizons, obviously, and keep doing that after college. Read philosophy, read psychology, everything. Because you'll find stuff that really resonates and does help you become a better person, and do better at your job. So yeah, that's all I got.
All right, thank you. Talk to me about maybe one or two skills that are really important in your work that you can maybe even trace back to having started to develop it as an undergraduate student. And like, maybe specifically, how did you start to develop it? Might have been some leadership roles. Desmond, you talked about leadership. I guess what I'm looking for here is, what are the kinds of things that are qualities, strengths, competencies, not ones that you've learned on the job, but sort of ones that you had that have been important in your work. And Desmond, if you want to start with this one and talk about that just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So one major thing was communication skills. And coming into Hanover, I thought I was pretty personable. I thought I was decent to talk to people. But what Hanover taught me to do was take a deep breath and think about what I want to say before I say it, and try to use my experiences to better create a message that I'm sending to that person, and understand that communication is a two-way street. So I'm sure all of you have the experience of walking down Hanover's campus and smiling and waving at people. Don't ever stop doing that. It sounds crazy, but it's something that has helped me a ton, whether it's in my professional life, my personal life. And I didn't really value it as much as I did until I got out and realized if you just walk down the hallway of any of your jobs, whether it's in a research facility, whether it's in a hospital, whether it's just down the street in your neighborhood, you smile and wave at somebody, that's going to open the door for you to have a better conversation with the people around you and understand what's going on around you. Another thing was time management. So I was very, very busy at Hanover, which I'm sure most of you are. We all have the propensity to do a lot of things at Hanover. And time management was one of those things that I really had to hone in college because of the travel, because of sports, because of being a hall director, because of having to work all these different things. Having those skills and focusing on those coming out of college will make your life that much easier, to where when you're done with work, you can kind of turn your brain off from work and go enjoy your life. And you can make sure that, okay, hey, my calendar's full. I get all these text messages, all that kind of stuff, but I can just turn off after work because I did all the things I need to do. And then the last thing was dependability. At Hanover, you're going to be asked to do a lot of different things. And I really focused on, when somebody asked me to do something, I was like, great, let me say yes or no to this, and then make sure I did it. And following through with things is really, really important throughout life, but a lot in your professional life, where as long as you follow through with something, you're going to go a lot further, and your job is going to be a lot easier, in my opinion, than if you put it off, or don't do it, then people start moving and looking other directions. So those are kind of the top three for me.
Excellent. Really, really good. Allison, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, the first one I thought of was decision making. And I think specifically, I remember in my interview talking about how I could make ethical decisions, both in a timely manner and how I thought through that. And that was really interesting to who was interviewing me. And I think you have an opportunity to do that in multiple places at Hanover. I remember specifically like sorority life, your personal life, you're surrounded by many different people. There's lots of influences around you. especially even in group projects. Being able to kind of think through why you're making the decision and not just jumping into something is still something I use from my day-to-day. And then the other thing I wrote down, critical thinking. I think that's going to help you no matter where you go. And I think Hanover gives you a really unique opportunity to talk to your classmates and really explain why you feel a certain way. I think Desmond said it best, like being able to communicate that, like your thought process is going to help someone else understand, and it's going to help you be more influential to those people around you.
Wow, you guys have some really good ones here. Ryan, what kind of skills do you think have been so important in your work?
Yeah, definitely communication. Being, playing baseball in college, and being a fraternity and biology major, like there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of different people you have to interact with. And in my job, that's, exponentially increased with, there's different personality types, and to be able to interact with those different personality types is really huge, like emotional intelligence, really. So if any of you do have an opportunity to take a course in emotional intelligence or anything like that, I think it could, no matter what you do, I think it could really, really help, because you interact with your coworkers in a different way, your different clients, dealing with medical assistants to nurses to providers to CEO of a hospital. Like there's just a lot of different personality types, and if you can adapt and know how to communicate, that's the biggest thing. Communication. It's it for me. I think that's the biggest. So
You touched on just collaborating with all sorts of people. I think all three of you have talked about that importance, and I know you get that opportunity in class and in plenty of opportunities at Hanover. Any questions from the students? You guys have listened to a lot of folks. What do you want to ask these people based on what you've heard from people in more provider type of roles? Did any of you consider more traditional care provider roles while you were undergraduates? Allison, you did? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I think I was really interested. Can you guys hear me?
It bugged out a little bit, but now I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Early on, I was really interested in that direct patient care. And I think it was learning from some opportunities to shadow that wasn't where my skills best, like it didn't suit me. And I think it was really obvious that what I thought I was passionate about was the project management, and I could still help people without that direct patient interaction. So I think it was learning that wasn't my strong suit, and kind of evolving from there what other opportunities there were.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Des or Ryan, either of you think about that, and why did you not go that direction?
yeah, I mean, I was going to be a doctor when I went to Hanover, pre-med. I think they really did set the expectation. My teacher, my professors, and said there's a lot of opportunities out there, and this might not be right for you. So as Allison said, I would highly recommend, if you have family, friends at all, just using that network and shadow. I mean, just ask. People love to tell you what they do and have you just sit in their life and see what their job is. So they'd be very happy to have you shadow. And that's kind of a thing. It kind of shows how unprepared I was going into Hanover. and just what I just didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. So I was going to be a doctor, and then that didn't happen because I wanted to do this. And then, and I've never looked back. I have zero regrets. And I'm extremely happy. So
I'm sure you knew plenty. You just you don't know until you go,
right.
until you experience different things. So did you ever do any kind of shadowing or?
Yeah, so
You talked more about working in a lab, right?
Well, so I also came in thinking I was going to be pre-med too. And then kind of things settled in. I realized, I'm sorry to all the biology majors, I wasn't the biggest fan of biology. And so I decided to go a different route. But yeah, and then I also shadowed, I have a buddy's, his dad is a podiatrist. So I shadowed him. And then through the contacts through Cook, I was kind of able to shadow some other people, some other types of physicians. And I just realized it would have felt similar to being in a lab, in my opinion. Now, some people would think it's different, but for me, I was like, I like the mobility. I like to be able to kind of control my own schedule and things like that. And so I decided to go down this way and haven't looked back either. So it's been great.
Okay, I love hearing that, because identifying those pieces that resonate with you, and if that face-to-face, meeting with patients, day in, day out, is just not your thing, then there are many other options, and hence inviting the three of you just to talk about these other options within the health field. Allison, you had a biology degree, but it sounds like you're mostly using like your business minor and the other skills that you've developed. Is that true? Do you use your science knowledge in what you do?
It comes most into play when we're kind of starting a new trial, understanding, what drug we're testing, what we're testing for. Having a good understanding of that can kind of help one, communicate with the doctors and, know the supplies they need, and help with budget. What tests are they going to be running, things like that. Not necessarily down to that micro level that, I really memorized in college, but it does help kind of upfront gain rapport and just help an overall understanding and flow with the trials.
Okay, I'm sure they're glad that you have that bachelor's degree in biology. I know a couple of you have minors in business. How important do you think that is? If these students don't have a business minor, could they still maybe pursue the route that you took? Maybe Desmond, we want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the business minor, the business scholars program was really, really important. And I'm a big fan of scientific communication. I think sometimes what happens in the science realm is that we take these very complex ideas and we can't condense them down into very digestible things. And when we're in the science field, we're constantly surrounded by people in science. When you get in the real world, you realize that most people aren't in science, even if they're in the science realm. And so communication is huge. So whether you have a business minor or you stick just in the science realm, make sure you really focus on learning communication skills and how to condense your ideas down into things that are digestible. So the way I always look at it is, if I can explain it to somebody randomly on the street or to a 7-year-old, then I truly understand the information. And that's really important to convey whatever you're trying to explain to somebody else, especially in the science realm where we're dealing with very complex ideas that don't necessarily come intuitively to people. So yeah, the business minor has helped me a ton. But if you don't go down that route, definitely still focus on communication, because whether you are presenting your most recent study or you're presenting some sort of scientific data, you're going to have to be able to present it and explain it and do a really good job. And the people that do the best are the ones that can explain their stuff in the most concise way possible.
So I hear you encouraging students to put themselves out there, maybe do research where you have to present. Certainly we have, a requirement for at least one speaking course, and I think lots of students end up taking more than one. Do any of you have any other suggestions about what these students could be doing to sort of help themselves move towards a career such as what you have, that would help them in the application process, have them, be looked at seriously. Any thoughts or ideas, things that maybe we haven't said or haven't emphasized clearly?
Yeah, I would just say, kind of like I said before, ask questions. Find people in these types of industries, whether you do it on LinkedIn or whether you do it in your family, friends, or your fellow students, and just talk things through. And talking to people that have experience. I mean, I don't, compared to people that have been in this industry for 10 years plus, I don't know anything. So I still talk to people and try to learn information every single day. I think that's the biggest thing, is just be willing to learn. And I think most of you should genuinely like to learn. You're at Hanover for a reason. And I would say, just back for that last question, I did not do a business minor or business scholars program at all. So, and then I did want to say that my company, I'm probably in the minority of the positions, because there's structural biologists, there's genetic counselors. I think we employ 150 genetic counselors or something of that nature.
Wow.
People that really get into the nitty gritty of genetics. And just for instance, there was a gentleman that came out that was very influential in coming out with our new product a couple of years ago, and which is bringing RNA analysis to pair with the DNA analysis we're already doing. He just studied one gene, was researching one gene for like 7 years. And this guy's had the impact, the impact is crazy. So when you think about impact, if you really want to make an impact, there's a lot of things you can do within these laboratory environments and research environments too. So.
Awesome. Desmond or Allison, anything that you think of that these students could be intentional in specific kinds of classes, experiences, things that could help them work their way towards a career in this field?
Yeah, I think maybe not something like a specific class, but being able to really diversify your resume as you're starting to apply is really helpful. So trying not to just put all your time into one club, or I think I mentioned before, like just your major, being able to have lots of different opportunities, because that's how you're going to have lots of experiences to grow those transferable skills. And you're going to get a lot more of those and a lot more talking points going into your interview if you kind of put yourself out there and try different things. Even if you just try a club for a year and you decide you don't like it, I mean, that's great. And you've probably learned something from it and you just don't realize it. And kind of going back to the business scholars program, business minor thing, I think you can have those opportunities that those classes provide without having to be in them. And taking those classes that put you in group projects or presentations. I think Hanover is your opportunity to try so many different things without like minimal risk. So that would be my biggest thing to try to do, is really diversify your experiences.
This class, the students know that I ask them to always reflect. Like, what are you learning? What takeaways did you have from this visitor or that visitor, this experience, and so on. And so I hear you saying, get involved in a range of things, but not only get involved, be reflective about how are you growing through this activity, and what pieces can you draw from it? I think being the act of being reflective, thinking a little bit deeper about not just what you're learning, coursework in your classes, but learning from all sorts of things as well. That's really, really good. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think the only two things: utilize the Hanover network. It's a lot bigger than you realize it is. And it's kind of a safe space to take chances. So it's, hey, I'm from Hanover. I want to know more about what you're doing. Let me know. The other thing is patience. I know from my experience, it takes a while to get, either it takes a while to get in the industry or whatever industry you're trying to get in, or it takes a while for you to feel like you know what you're doing. I've been in here for 7 years and I still kind of don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I do, but there's things that you learn every day, and there's constantly things where I'm like, I have no idea what to do. Teach me. So taking those two things into consideration are probably my two things.
So I think LinkedIn sounds like something students should be checking into, but we also, I don't know if the three of you are aware that Hanover does have a alumni mentoring program. So students, that's something that you could check into. Even if you want to connect with somebody for a short period of time just to talk about their career, we can pair you with those people. I'm doing it in the class to an extent. I so agree with you guys when you talk about having conversations, you know, learning from other people. How in the world are you going to know if something is the right fit for you unless you get an idea of what's important to that person? Do they enjoy it or not? And so on. So I'm hearing some really, really wonderful things here. Any questions from you students? Golly, you're so quiet. Jacob, do you have any questions? No, they're telling you everything. Okay. Can we get kind of nitty gritty here in a weird way? And if you don't have any idea, that's fine. But I'm just wondering concerning compensation for your position, say the entry level position. Do you have an idea what that could be for a student coming out of a bachelor's degree, what they might expect, and maybe what the range could be like over the lifetime? Any ideas about that with compensation? You're nodding, Desmond. What do you know?
So I would say the beginning, anywhere between, depends on what role you take. So in a sales role, I can speak to that. You'll probably start anywhere between 30 and 50, and then there's a compensation plan for commission and things like that. There are people in this field that make well over 600, and they make a lot of money. So it just kind of depends on where you're at, your tenure, what kind of devices you're selling, and things like that. But initially coming out, I would say anywhere between that 30 and 50 range is probably, from my experience, is what you could expect.
Okay, good to know. That's a huge range, but yeah. Anybody else know anything? If you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, I think, of course, it's always changing. But when I was looking, it was 45 to 55 was what, you know, entry without any previous like pharma experience was what I was looking at pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, good to know.
I echo what Allison and Desmond said, but I would add one thing. You're not in a huge position where you can negotiate, you know, salaries, but just showing that and kind of navigating that process to an employer, I think says a lot. So don't be afraid to, you know, you guys are going to have job opportunities. So don't be afraid to really sell yourself, and don't be afraid to ask for more always. So,
you know, the Career Center really has some great opportunities, and you've all talked about, you know, utilizing your resources, and just even that, what you're saying right there, Ryan, you know, how to talk about that kind of thing and practice it, you know. Did any of you have letters of recommendation written for you by Hanover faculty or Hanover folks? You did. Desmond, you did. Can you speak to kind of the importance of that?
Yeah, so I had 3 different ones. I had one from my coach, one from Casey Heckler, and then one more from he was my boss when I was a hall director. I try to diversify where I got them from to give different experiences. And I specifically asked them, hey, write about this experience you had with me, so I could kind of diversify the different letters of rec, so it showed the different sides. Similar to what Allison was saying, Hanover is going to allow you to kind of diversify your opportunities, and a letter of recommendation when you're going in for a job, it's kind of the culmination of that diversification, where you can ask somebody who you worked for, done projects with, and said, hey, listen, based on your experience with me, do you mind kind of explaining to somebody else the pros and cons? So,
and I think that's one of the advantages of Hanover, you know, so small, you can really get to know people. And it's not too early as a sophomore or a first-year student to start thinking in those terms. Not only because you may hope to get a letter from somebody someday, but it's really great to pick up mentors along the way and guides, you know. So we've got just 5 minutes left here. I want to give each of you maybe the opportunity to talk, maybe just a little bit more if there's something that you didn't address fully, but if you could talk just a little bit more about how prepared or maybe not prepared you felt, you know, coming away with a Hanover degree. What about the liberal arts education? Does that show up? I know you've mentioned pieces like critical thinking and communication skills, but if you even want to give a shout out to a specific professor or a class, here's your opportunity. So who wants to talk to that?
Is Rubino still there?
Darren?
Yeah,
Sure is. Any
I love
students
that
have
guy.
Darren Rubino, anybody? Maybe not in this group.
Yeah. That's a guy right there that's just not afraid to say what he thinks. And, you know, I think that's huge. He has a, you know, curious mind. I think
Mhm.
we've all hit on this, and especially with the liberal arts education, just be curious, just be curious about everything. And that kind of goes back to asking questions. And the more curious you are, the more that you're going to learn. And the more diverse that, you know, learning can be, because there's so much out there, and it can feel overwhelming at times. And I mean, we all feel overwhelmed at times, obviously, but having those friendships, I would say, is huge. Just being able to have someone that you can talk honestly to and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And just having that dialogue between the two of you, I think is huge.
It's interesting because Dr. Rubino is a botanist. He's an expert in trees. And so
That's
it's
the
not like
thing.
Ryan followed in his footsteps. It doesn't have to
I-
be, you know, that professor necessarily.
Yeah, he's a botanist, and I remember walking through the woods in one of our classes, and he's singing, you know, TLC waterfalls. Like, I mean, it's just it's hilarious. He's so great. But I had to get my Rubino shout out in.
Okay, I will share that with him, definitely. Desmond or Allison?
Yeah, I think I can kind of go into the preparedness leaving Hanover. I think, especially because I wasn't certain exactly where I was going, I just kind of had an idea that your Hanover experience is helpful, and you, as you mentioned, like reflecting on it's really important. You're only going to learn while interviewing. I think that was the biggest thing is, you know, you apply to all these things and you're just going to get better after each interview, because you're going to say something, you're like, oh shoot, that did not come out right. Like, don't say that next time. Like, you're just going to get better and better. So while you'll have a good experience and Hanover education in your pocket, you're just going to continue to grow. And you'll find that position, even though it seems really scary when you start, you'll get better and you have lots of resources available to you.
Awesome, thank you. Desmond, anything come to mind?
Yeah, there's two professors. Dr. Steiner taught me how to find something that you love and be insanely passionate about it. I've never seen a person in my entire life be so passionate about what he loves. And then Dr. Phillip, I know he's not there anymore, but he just, the way he went about enjoying life. I try to combine the two of those things together. And then to everybody else's point, I think Hanover prepares you for life. It prepares you for all the things that come with life, not just work. It prepares you how to think, communicate. You'll build relationships there that you'll have for the rest of your life. I know it sounds very cliche, but I promise you, Hanover will do the things that a big university does when it teaches for learning and things like that, but it also has this quaint feeling that only a small institution like Hanover can provide for you. So take advantage of both of those things and enjoy the experience.
Wow, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you, all three of you. This was really wonderful. It gave us a snapshot of who you are, what you're passionate about, and what you do. We appreciate you joining us for this hour. And thank you. Everyone, go have a wonderful evening. Thanks all.